The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is no substitute for professional care by your doctor or your qualified healthcare professional. Never disregard or delay professional medical advice because of something you've heard on this podcast or in any linked material. Guests who speak on this podcast express their own opinions, experience, and conclusions. Dr. Shirley neither endorses nor opposes any particular opinion discussed on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, practice, institution, or other entity with which Dr. Shirley may be affiliated.
Welcome to Forever Fab, the podcast on fashion, the art of living, and all things beauty. This podcast is curated by Dr. Shirley Madhere, MD, as the definitive source of holistic wellness through beauty.
Welcome to Forever Fab, the podcast dedicated to fashion, the art of living well, and all things beauty. I'm your host, Dr. Shirley Madhere, your purveyor of this definitive source of living a beautiful life. This week's episode is dedicated to clarity, and today's topic is part of the anti-aging series, Right Mind, Right Life, Beauty, and Brains. That said, they also say that you can choose your state of mind, and that if you choose your state, you can change your life. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Rebecca Siegel and Ms. Donna Lalwani. They believe that if you change your brain, you can change your life. Dr. Rebecca Siegel is an adult and child psychiatrist currently at the Amen Clinic in New York City, where she works with Ms. Lalwani, who is the clinical director at the Amen Clinic in New York. And Dr. Siegel specializes in the assessment and treatment of anxiety, mood disorders, and attention deficit disorder. I am particularly impressed with her and their holistic approach to brain health. She has a special interest in issues confronting women across all ages, and she's the mother of 3 teenage daughters. She currently lives in New York City. And as I mentioned, Ms. Donna Lalwani is the clinical director of the Amen Clinics in New York City. Welcome, Dr. Siegel. Welcome, Donna, if I may call you that. Dr. Siegel, what motivated you to go into medicine?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It is a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. I am the daughter of a physician. Okay. My dad is a neurologist.
So that's the answer.
Yeah. Part of it, yes. So I enjoyed hearing his stories when I was a child. Yes. And I loved knowing that, this was something that I could possibly pursue. And it took me a while. I went back to med school at 29, which was a definite a dream for sure. Yeah. I had children along the way.
Good for you. Getting it done.
But I got it done.
Good for you. And why psychiatry? Why study the brain and emotions? I mean, that's just such a vast, enigmatic field. Why did you choose psychiatry and the brain?
Well, like I said, my dad is a neurologist, so yes, I'd always known about the brain, but I also was so very interested in emotion and trying to understand all facets of why people were anxious or why they could be depressed and what, every way that could happen, whether that was biology or and genetics or whether it was environment, things like that.
Yes, and ultimately you found a lot of the answer lie in the brain, but more on that later. Donna, what motivated you to work at the Amen Clinic and to work with the brain and moods and anxiety, etc.?
I always had a fascination for brain health and education. I think that was so important in empowering us to take better steps, to live healthier, to live happier lives, to optimize our health and wellness. So for me, it seemed a natural step. And I had learned a little bit about Dr. Daniel Amen and his book on Change Your Brain, Change Your Life while I was doing other work in teaching and running other programs. So it was very powerful of basically seeing new insights on how people think, how they feel, how they function, and seeing brains walking around inside of people. So.
People often ask me, well, you're a plastic surgeon. Do you see, like facial deformities before you even get to know people? And sometimes, some things are pretty obvious. The both of you must see brains, right? That's pretty cool. So if let's dig deeper into brain health and what some of the things that can take away from that as well as add to that. So if we eat well, and we exercise appropriately, and we try to live the best lives possible and think positive thoughts, why should we even consider brain health? If we're doing everything else right, why do we have to look at our brains?
Well, these types of things, diet, nutrition, exercise, sleep, they are so important for brain health. I mean, besides being important for your body, but,
Yes.
what we do affects our brain, and
Yes.
that's what people need to understand. And not everybody understands that, and that is our sort of role to educate people.
Yeah.
And using SPECT scans is how we show them certain areas of their brains that, are functioning well or functioning not well enough or functioning a little too actively. So that's how we start using SPECT scans to help people make diagnoses and to treat them.
Yeah. I would agree wholeheartedly with that. And I have to say, I'm a patient. And what brought me to you at the Amen Clinic was that this was my year of total, holistic, fantabulous health and wellness. And I'm looking at everything else. I'm looking at my thyroid, I'm looking at my hormones, I'm looking at my eyes. And I stopped and I asked myself, well, I'm spending a lot of time digging deep and looking internally, but I'm missing a very important organ. And I thought, I need to go look at my brain. And I'm a student of IIN, the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and that's when I first met and heard Dr. Amen give his lecture on the brain, and it was so compelling, I thought, okay, I'm going to make an appointment. But we'll talk a little bit about that later, because I'd love, Donna, for you to explain what happens when someone comes in.
It is,
yes.
It is incredible when you can show somebody how their brain is functioning.
Yes.
And SPECT scans, they are amazing for validating, for explaining,
Discovering.
Discovering.
It's pretty fabulous.
I've had people burst into tears. I've had people, thank me profusely for showing them why they feel the way they do, and and then it becomes, how do we help them to feel better?
Yeah, it is part of looking for the root cause, right? If you're not feeling well and you're not crazy, right? There's a cause. There's always a reason, and looking at the brain may have the answer. It's compelling information, and I hope lots of people can take advantage of that. So let's talk about the brain a bit more. I do believe that in order to truly live a holistically well life, that you have to look at your brain. It's part of the whole system. So what can we do as lay people without a SPECT scan or without a consultation? What can we do on a daily basis to improve our lives and improve our brains?
I think this is part of the field of anti-aging.
Yeah.
And starting early, thinking about surrounding ourselves with a healthy community. And I've heard from Dr. Amen say, find the healthiest person that you can stand and be around them. Form your tribe.
I love her, but I can't stand her.
Healthy people from inside and out.
Yeah.
With like-minded activities. Find your passion. Find your purpose. If you want to live a healthier and happier life, developing a connection for activities with your children, with your spouse, with your friends is a really important one. Staying active is crucial for brain and for body health and wellness. So we see this as anti-aging, but it does affect how you think and how you feel. And, so this elaborate circuitry of our brain system, find another clinician, too, that's aligned in your community, someone that can work together with you. We certainly support and connect and collaborate with other coaches, both in the clinics, outside, as a global network. Find someone who's brain system oriented to think about your unique brain health type. You can do other assessments, just like we do here in the clinic, that even without neuroimaging can give us a better understanding for what you may need to optimize.
Right, and everyone is different, obviously.
Well, community is just incredibly important. It can lift people up out of depression. It can calm anxiety. Finding like-minded people, even finding people who are not exactly like you, can be educational, can improve your well-being in every way.
Or change your perspective and enlighten you in some way. Agreed. So speaking of elaborate circuitry of the brain, it's been said that no one uses their brain maximally or optimally. Do we really understand enough about the brain to be able to say that we're using only 3% of it or 50% of it, et cetera? How can we actually maximize that function if we don't know what we're using?
I mean, I guess we can do things that we know will improve, especially the blood flow to our brains and our body. That is incredibly important. And there are many things that we can do to improve that, which many of which you've already mentioned, but should definitely be restated and resaid, and gotten out to the wider population for sure. Things like you said, diet and nutrition, so important. So many people really are so unaware of what they're putting into their body affects their brain in every way.
Yes.
Things like sleep. Sleep is also incredibly important. You know, if you don't get enough sleep, how could you be functioning optimally? Right. We really need to emphasize that there are so many stressed out people and people whose lives are incredibly hectic and busy and have children and have jobs. But trying to figure out how to improve sleep is beyond important.
Yes, I agree with that. It's, you know, it's really interesting because there's so many people nowadays with the whole, you know, wellness boom just everywhere, that people are thinking about how they're eating and what they're putting into their bodies. But I still think there's a little bit of a disconnect between getting enough sleep and how what we're eating and what we're not eating and whether or not we're sleeping well is affecting our brain. So it's fascinating to me, you know, that this marvelous organ that sits, you know, up top, that's, you know, connected to the higher power, if you will, sometimes is forgotten in very basic routines. So speaking of foods and eating well, are there certain foods that can improve brain function, or is it different for everyone?
It's so important to eat across the rainbow. You know, eat healthy and fresh foods wherever you can. You know, we try to encourage people to think about, you know, the rainbow, whether it be from the nuts to the berries to vegetables, healthy and fresh foods, from meats, getting enough kind of protein, whether it be meat or plant-based proteins.
So eating according to the colors of the rainbow, make sure that every meal has several colors.
Yes.
Got it.
Being cognizant of what we put on our plate is an important one, too, and can influence our children and our families with some healthy lifestyles and habits, because the food affects how we feel, how we can sleep.
Right.
Well, it's a complicated topic for sure, and certainly for women and for girls and for a mother of 3 girls. It's definitely really important how you show your own body image and how that relates to, you know, and transfers to your kids, daughters as well as sons.
Yes, of course.
And it's so very important to have a positive body image.
Yes.
It's not always easy.
No, not always easy. What do you teach your 3 teenage girls about body image and brain health? Are they related?
Well, I do try to teach them to be healthy, and that means healthy in every way. That's healthy diet, nutrition healthy, healthy meaning exercise healthy.
Yes.
Exercise, for me, besides being great for your body, it definitely it can calm anxiety.
Yes.
It can, you know, release the anti-stress hormones, cortisol, so that you do feel better.
Right.
And serotonin, things that are so important to help you feel better.
Right.
Lift the mood, decrease the anxiety that so many people feel these days, for sure.
Especially in a big city. And so what if, I'm just saying, some people don't necessarily get in the whole organic fresh foods or don't get in the proper amount of exercise, even though that's different for everyone. Are there any supplements that can help? Are there supplements that you would recommend, although everyone, again, is an individual and is different, but are there supplements in general that would help to improve brain health?
Absolutely. I mean, we recommend almost everybody a daily multivitamin.
Yes.
Omega-3 fatty acids. So vitally important for improving and maximizing blood flow to your brain and your body. Absolutely. The other thing is it's very important to check certain levels of, vitamins and hormones in your blood to know if you're deficient in any way. Things like vitamin D, so incredibly important. And hormone levels in women, estrogen, things like that, progesterone, even testosterone can wreak havoc, on hormones and acne and girls and women and things like that.
Yeah.
And certainly, talking about menopause and talking about, menstruation and things like that. That the hormones are on a wild ride.
Isn't it very interesting that we talk about those things mostly as they, apply to the female gender, and yet the word men is in both those words: menopause, menstruation. I mean, what is going on? I think they get affected. I think they get affected too, but nobody likes to talk about it. So you see, in the clinic, you actually see before and afters of people's brains. You take pictures at rest, you take pictures when they're focusing on an activity, and you actually see differences many times. So then you make some recommendations and have them come back for follow-up. And do you really believe that you can rewire the brain with lifestyle changes, such as eating well, exercise, surrounding yourself with positive community? Is rewiring really possible?
We believe so, and we see those transformations happen every day at the clinic. So when folks are coming through, it doesn't happen overnight.
Of course.
We have to scaffold for different steps and change in our lifestyle, healthier habits, but it certainly helps us to be better armed and equipped with a brain healthy, or what we call like a brain warrior tribe.
Yes.
Where it's aligned to help us meet and achieve those goals. And also to kind of help us map out, we also use some other tools like the one-page miracle. When you think about what's important to you, whether it be your family, aspects of your finances, your career, for your children, their education, what are components that you can remind yourself every single day that help you stay on target?
Right, things that you're grateful for.
Yes, gratitude is such an important one.
I agree 100%. There's some neuroscientists who believe, I was reading in a paper recently, that there's some neuroscientists who believe that if you negatively compare yourself to others, or if you watch bad news or negative news on the TV every night, that those things can actually negatively affect your brain, and that they decrease mental clarity and they decrease focus. So are there other things that would potentially decrease brain function or your ability to focus and function optimally?
Well, absolutely. So the important part of the brain that we're looking at is within the frontal lobe, or the prefrontal cortex, which is involved exactly with attention and focus, executive functioning, planning, organizing, involved with impulsivity, impulse control, things like that. And along with some things called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, in children, but also may persist into adulthood as well. Things like traumatic brain injuries, things like that can tremendously affect your prefrontal cortex and how you focus and how you attend and your attention, things like that. So that it's so important to make sure you're protecting your brain and your body. Absolutely.
So you could have fallen on your head 10 years ago and not realize that is actually affecting you as an adult or 10 years later.
It can be chronic trauma, it can be acute trauma, exactly. And that's the other reason you have to be very aware of, even in your kids, what they're doing with how they're protecting their brains.
Right. And trauma can also be, and correct me if I'm wrong, traumatic can also be stress. High levels of either acute burst of mad crazy stress or chronically slow burn kind of stress. That is also traumatic and obviously has effects on the brain and changes the brain. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Whew.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's serious.
The emotional centers of your brain, the deeper limbic system, as we say, chronic stress, acute stress can lead to huge changes in those certain areas that are, may lead you to have post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that, or to be chronically depressed, or have terrible debilitating anxiety, things like that.
So we have to protect ourselves and our children not only from physical trauma against the head and the brain, but also emotional and psychological trauma. Okay, so I do personally believe that there is a brain gut beauty, speaking of the microbiome, I do believe that there is a brain gut beauty connection. So in lay terms, how can you explain that to our listeners? What is the relationship between the brain and the gut and beauty, or the brain and beauty, besides you think you're beautiful and therefore you are? Which is true. If you think it, it's true.
Absolutely. Well, the gut is the second brain, and we really believe that it drives the hardware and engine for our brain.
Yes.
So considering that we have neurotransmitters in the gut, this is why we think about the foods as a form of healthy fuel, but also looking at vitamin deficiency, so where we can supplement and where it may be supportive to create another healthy, better environment for healing. So that's where we also say for people coming in for optimization health later, how can we then further optimize?
Right.
So we do address the microbiome and the gut health. So if people do need other probiotics as well to help, we do see a lot of clients that have from chronic fatigue syndrome to they've had toxicity and infections, where again over antibiotic use too. Yeah. So
I kind of think we're, I'd say, a grab and go society.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to make a healtty meal every meal of the day.
Right.
But you can make smart choices.
That's true.
Even if it is fast,
yeah.
in quotes, food.
Right.
You can make much better choices to help your, if your gut is not feeling good, if you're
yes.
eating too many carb-related foods or
yeah.
sugar foods, you're not going to feel good.
Yeah.
And that's not going to help whether you're a child, when you need to go to school and you need to function all day and
yeah.
you need to, be learning and, thriving and things
yeah.
like that. So it's really important to make good choices, and parents have to help their kids
it's
to
true.
make good choices.
Oh my gosh, it's
not always easy. But
not always easy, and I have to tell you, that's something that I struggle with. I am just a carbivore, carnivore and a carbivore, and it's really challenging. I'm trying to be more thoughtful about my carb choices because I obviously don't metabolize them well. I tend to hang on to those, but yes, it's true. We can all be armed with the information and the knowledge to make better choices, and then, they say pain is a part of life, but suffering is a choice. So, at least we have the information to make the proper choices.
You've just listened to part 1 of Forever Fab podcast. Please stay tuned for part 2, coming up next.